right, so good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to the Truth Unveiled 2.0. I'm your host, Drew Keaton. We have a special guest tonight. Before I get to my guest, I want to thank everybody who's been tuned in to the Truth Unveiled and a lot of content, a lot of information we've been spreading out there. Also, thank you for tuning into the Alchemy Hour. We have a new time. It's Wednesday, and you can catch us at 9:15. And make sure you hit our YouTube page, which is Iceman with 2 N's 413. Make sure you hit the page, the content. We're live actually on YouTube right now. We're live on BOT, Brotherhood on the Move TV as well. We're live on that. And we're also live on my page on Facebook. We actually got a board member of BOT. We're about to make some moves right now that's here to say. So listen, let me introduce the special guest. I wasn't going to do a quick bio because if I would have did that, it would have took up about 20 minutes introducing him. Come on. So I know he's humble as ever. So listen, we have Kevin Harewood, CEO of Eclectic Entertainment. This is Brooklyn's finest right here. So he is has 30 plus years in the entertainment and music industry. He is responsible for people's careers like Freddie Jackson, Samuel Jackson, Bill Nunn, Najee, Chris Rock, just a host of other people. I can't even, A&R Rev, Music VP. I can't even, where do I go? Author, one of his movies, had one of my favorite soundtracks in a good documentary, 25 Strong. Just like when you have time, Kevin.
First of all, I'm not gonna claim being responsible for Samuel L. Jackson, even though I have worked with him. I was fortunate that Bill Nunn was my homie,
right,
from when I lived in Atlanta, and Bill and Sam were homies from when they both went to Morehouse.
Okay.
So that when Bill actually came, when we were doing Death by Temptation, I knew Sam was by reputation because he was involved in the Negro Ensemble Company at the time, which a lot of people came out of NEC. And Bill used to come to New York and stay at Sam's house.
Oh, wow.
So that when he came to get his first check for Death by Temptation, Sam was with him, and I cast him as the father to the main character in Death by Temptation before he was famous, which was a good thing because it keeps making the film more attractive through the years. So the film, people like Bill Nunn and Kadeem Hardison,
right,
and Sam, Michael Michelle, who weren't famous when we did that film, are famous, now. Sam is one of the most famous of all time. So it recently actually just got added to BET Plus.
Okay.
Because the value increased up. But I'm blessed. I've been fortunate to work in fields for most of my adult life that literally I would do for free.
Right.
Which is work in music, work in film and television, and work in sports, and much of the stuff I would do for free. And there have been times and downturns where you are doing it for free. So I've been blessed. God is good.
Yeah, and I want to add this too, because we had Dwayne Hendricks and Alex Barbier on here about child murders, and something's real big about to happen. They'll actually be in New York in a couple of days. We're interviewing with People Magazine. This is going to be
okay.
So I know when Kevin was in the ATL area, he actually worked for a local newspaper and interviewed some of the family members in the child Atlanta murders too. So when we were talking, he was giving us a lot of insight on that too. So not only with the music industry, you even was in the interviewing industry and worked for a local paper there as well.
Right. I was actually the Atlanta. I did work for local papers, but I was also the Atlanta correspondent for the National Black Network News, which was a national radio news syndicated news outlet that came on in most markets, most cities where with strong Black populations. They had the National Black Network News Service. So I had covered that case in the courtroom. I became close with a few of the parents of young folks that unfortunately were killed, and William and Mathis, who was one of the three most visible mothers, was actually one of my neighbors. She lived essentially right around the corner from me in Southwest Atlanta at the time, and I'm glad to see that the documentary, that came on HBO, that we did a lot of talking about, was last week was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award, and John Legend's company was one of the producers on that.
Yeah, and I listen. The one that's coming out that they're doing right now is gonna blow everybody's minds away too. And the documentary was put together well, but there's a lot of intricacies that I don't know about it. A lot of people don't know, but this one is going to get into it. But congratulations to John Legend's company for that award. And it's good when documentaries can come out and because there are families that are still grieving over that, like 20 plus years later, and things in our communities, melanated communities, things like we always say, things never get solved. So this is just like a breath of fresh air that is being revisited and people are looking at it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole generation of people that grew up under that cloud, the families who were directly involved are definitely grieving, and other people who knew those families, and other people who were just young people growing up in Atlanta at that particular time. It affects your entire life.
Right. So on to Atlanta. There were a few projects that Mr. Harewood took place upon, but we're gonna get into the new project that he has right now. And I apologize ahead of time because I had a clip, but my internet's been showing out, as they say, at the house, so I had to come to the office, so I wasn't able to load the clip. But there's a new movie, and how ironically and how appropriate at the same time. It is February, and it is Black History Month to everybody, which I mean is 365 days a year anyway for most of us. But there's a new movie called Am I Black Enough? And right here is your director and producer, and a co-producer, right? Director, co-producer?
Right, director and writer and producer with my cousin, Stephen Booth. Yeah.
Right. Now, what was the inspiration and actually for doing this movie? Because actually, when I seen the trailer, and you can go check out the trailer on YouTube, I was cracking up. I was laughing at some of the stuff that was going in. So there's a lot of seriousness to it, but there's a lot of like humorous, I guess, for for a captive audience as well too. What was the making of it?
Well, the situation is, it's good that you did laugh somewhat. The genesis of Am I Black Enough? The official title is Am I Black Enough for You?
Yeah.
And yes, you can see the trailer on YouTube. The film is not officially out yet. It'll be out the latter part of March on various streaming services, including Amazon. The genesis of the film was a conversation that I had with comedian AJ Jamal. He's a very prominent comedian for the last couple of decades. Mm-hmm. We had him in Springfield, and I shot actually part of a series in Springfield that ended up not being in the film.
Okay.
AJ's been on had a show on Comedy Central years ago. He was part of the for some time a part of the cast of Living Color. Has been in various movies and is tours the world as a comedian, and he's a contemporary and a peer of people like Steve Harvey, Arsenio Hall, and Drew Carey, right, and John Hinton, because they're all Cleveland people. Mm-hmm. And when AJ first, I think Arsenio moved to LA first, I think, and Arsenio and AJ went to college together, and when AJ first moved to Hollywood, a gentleman by the name of Roy Gerber, who was a very, very powerful entertainment manager, working with people like Arsenio Hall and others, told him that he would never make it.
Oh, wow.
And the reason he told him he would never make it wasn't because he wasn't funny. It was because AJ doesn't use profanity in his act.
Okay.
So this white Jewish manager told him he would never make it as a comedian because he wasn't black enough, since he didn't use profanity in his act. So we were like, when he told me this, I was like, that's crazy. Like, that's saying that we all exist in a monolith.
Right.
And we all act and do the same, and we all come from the same point of view. So that led us on a track where originally we were actually doing a real documentary to dispel Black stereotypes.
Right.
So I went to first in entertainment industry friends of mine to talk about Blackness in the music business, and one of my friends, Buddy Lewis, who's a comedian originally from Gary, Indiana, who now has been in Hollywood for many years. You've seen him in Black Dynamite. He's one of the writers on Real Husbands of Hollywood. He created the Showtime, was one of the co-creators of the Showtime show, White Famous. Buddy grew up in Gary, Indiana, and was a swimmer. So he went to Howard University on a swimming scholarship. Right. So I interviewed him. I interviewed Maya Angelina, singer, who's a mixed race person. And then as we were doing it kind of took a life of its own, where it's like, let's really blow this out. And we, I made a decision to script some of it, because some of the stuff that actually happens could be viewed as being so outrageous that you couldn't believe it happened. Right. So, in real life. So we scripted part of it. 99, I would say 99% of the stuff that actually ends up happening actually did happen. Wow. But I changed who it happened to. Okay. So it's like, we call it a mock-of-a-mentary, a mockumentary of a documentary, because the format is a documentary, but the beginning part of it actually are real interviews, and then we do the mock interviews, but the situations in the mock interviews are real. They just so on and so forth. Many of them happened to me, or I was around when it happened. Like when I was in 2 in particular, there's a scene in the film where the character that plays the main character in the movie, we end up looking for first who defines Blackness, and who decides what is Black, and who decides what is Black. And then we go on. We're looking for the Blackest Man in America. We call it Henry Gates meets Pootie Tang and Borat. I tag it. Yeah. And the main character is a character called Jomo Johnson, who's a Black college professor that's a Black nationalist figure after that is popular. So kind of like in the wave, a little bit after the U.P. Newtons and H.L. Browns and those people. And his sister talks about how one time the white kids came to school and threw eggs at the black kids, which was a minority in the school. They were going to school in a white neighborhood. On Halloween, like with a van full of eggs thrown at the Black kids. And she also talks about how one time that this white girl in the class got up and said, well, Black people don't have any culture. White people, we have spaghetti. Right? It's like, which both of those actually happened to me when I was going to school in the Bensonhurst and Bay Ridge, which was a largely Italian section of Brooklyn. Right.
You know what, Kevin? I was gonna you went on to tell the story. I was actually gonna ask you that the makeup of you growing up, because I know we had conversations personally, and you were about growing up in Brooklyn, and the difference in the different areas and how racist it was back then. And people don't realize how that happened. So that actually is a story that actually happened to you.
Right. Yeah.
As well.
I went to school. Okay. I went to school. Okay. So my elementary school years were spent right in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Shout out to PS 44,
Right.
Madison, between Troop and Sumner, then now Marcus Garvey Boulevard in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, right in the heart of Bedford-Stuyvesant. And then when I got to middle school, I went out of the neighborhood. They say, you know, in other parts of the country, they say busing, but in New York, the transportation is so good, they give you a bus pass, and then you take public transportation to go where you go. So if anybody's watched the show, Everybody Hates Chris, Chris Rock actually talks a lot about that in that show, about him going to school in these neighborhoods where you have problems with the Italian kids. So the ironic thing is that, especially for high school, at that time, there was no co-educational academic high school in central Brooklyn.
Okay.
That was co-educational, that put you on a college track. So if you were on that track, you had to go out of the neighborhood. You know, if you didn't want to go to a vocational school,
right?
And if you didn't want to go to school with all boys, like I wanted to go to school with girls, so I could have walked to the legendary boys' high school,
right?
But I wanted to go to school with girls. So now, ironically, later in the '80s, they combined boys' high school and girls' high school, and the school that Pearl Washington and people like that went to is called Boys and Girls at a different location.
Okay, so
but back then it was Boys High, and there was Girls High. So, you know, I went out the neighborhood, and it was quite an adventure, to say the least.
Let me ask you this: were you did when you were in high school, did people look at you differently because you were from another side of town, as in that they thought you like stereotype? Did they stereotype you a certain way? And if you play sports on that team, did you get a pass because you play sports?
Okay, so that's a couple of questions. So in terms of, you mean, did they look at you differently at the school?
Yes.
People that lived in the neighborhood. Okay, yes. So in terms of, did they look at you differently? The majority answer is yes, because my junior high schools and high schools were pretty much like 90% Italian and 10% everybody else. So that everybody else included the Jewish kids, the whatever else, white kids that weren't Jewish or Italian, black kids, Puerto Rican kids, and whatever else you may have, you know, Asian kids. So the Italian kids historically in that neighborhood, you know, quite frankly, I went to a school where a lot of the offspring, a lot of the parents or uncles of those kids were like mobbed up. So that in my high school, like Joe Colombo, the Mafia Don, like lived within walking distance of my high school.
Right.
And even though, like, say, if you were like really mobbed up and a high level person, though, or you know, a person that was well to do, those people sent their kids to Catholic schools.
Right.
Okay. Ironically, Dr. Fauci, who's obviously many years older than me, went to one of the high schools in that neighborhood, you know, years before I was out there. But even though they sent their kids to Catholic schools, they were concerned about the neighborhoods, and they didn't want us in those neighborhoods.
Right.
So one of the funny things about it is if you know, there was the TV show Welcome Back, Kotter.
Right.
And Welcome Back, Kotter features a black kid who hangs out with John Travolta and Fonzie and all them, right? Well, my high school is the opening shot that's used on that TV show, Electric High School in Brooklyn. And we used to laugh because Lawrence Hilton Jacobs' character would have never been able to hang out with those Italian kids like that at that school for the most part. And even to the point where there was a white Italian kid who played basketball, who hung out with, he liked hanging out with black kids. So he dressed like black kids, young black kids. He cut classes with us, played handball outside, stuff like that with us outside. But he had to live in that neighborhood when we were gone over the weekend. And one weekend they beat him up and called him a nigger. So to us, just many of those people, we were just niggers. That's all. Look at us, we were niggers, which is why I don't use that term now.
Right.
Now, in terms of the sports, you did get some sort of pass to some extent, or if you had did something that showed them, which was hard to do, but if you had did something that showed them that you wasn't afraid, they would deal with you slightly different, not majorly different, and depend on if the person that you ran into knew you had did what you did. So when I was 2 weeks of going into my high school, I didn't like to be pushed. So this big Italian kid pushed me going into lockers at the end of the day, and I hit him. And it started a riot. My best friend in high school actually met in this riot. He came to my aid in this riot. He had actually just moved to New York from Washington, D.C. And he said, it's actually funny because we were reminiscing that we met in the riot, that he was the first one to come to my aid in the riot. And he laughed and he said, well, I had just moved to New York, and being from D.C., I had never seen white kids fight back to black kids. If I would have known that these white kids would fight back like that, I may not have jumped in, in the thing. And so some people wouldn't mess with me because they thought I was crazy. But for the most part, you not only have to deal with the kids that were in the school, but you also have to deal with kids that were in the neighborhood that weren't in the school, that may not have known that they thought I was crazy, because I wasn't really crazy. It was more like I didn't like to be pushed. And then once you swung on somebody, you then had to keep going on, because you started something. So, so then it became kind of like, because the riot kind of went on for several days. So we actually strategized on how we was going to deal with this riot, called in some enforcements from our neighbor to come out there to help us. And I had to stand up because, now that I hit this kid, even though he was much bigger than me, and I was hella scared, to be quite frank. But I couldn't let them know that I was scared like I was. And that's how that went.
And it was respect. So are there things in the movie that you shared that like you will not share that happened that you think is embarrassing? Or you just couldn't get to, is there like a part 2 to this, or you just couldn't get to everything?
Well, I mean, obviously you got to choose the things that you got to choose. I mean, you're making a movie. You have a certain amount of time to tell the story. In this case, an hour. So I choose things like that I feel that resonate with me in my life, and B, that you think would resonate with other people, or that would kind of like have people be, wow, it's like, you went through that would tell something about something, and also provoke thought, because people think of New York as being such a liberal place. And it really isn't anywhere near as liberal as people think that it is, especially back then in terms of race. So you would, if I would tell some of the same stories and people would have said it was Boston or the South, nobody would think twice. But when you say that, hey, look, this happened in Brooklyn in the mid 70s, well, many people from outside is like, what? Like, so, I chose things that that resonate. Now, some of the things, let's say if if my parents knew that I was dealing with this situation. And at one point in my life, like my closest friend from elementary school went out to the junior high school with us, and then he couldn't deal with it. And his mom's was like, you're coming back to the neighborhood.
Right.
So he came back to the neighborhood. My parents asked me, did I want to come back to the neighborhood? And I had built up this thing where it's like, look, like I was kind of like a small kid.
Right.
So by being small, I guess I had that Napoleonic complex. It was like, right. I'm not letting these people run me out of nowhere.
Right.
So I'm like, no, I'm not coming back to the neighborhood. I'm going to stay out here, and I'm not letting these people dictate things to me.
Right.
Which had pros and cons to it, I think, over the long term.
Right. And and you know what, everybody listen, that's a story within itself. So you always hear this story and it might mean something to people. It might not mean, but that really is a story within itself. So it's about perseverance sometimes and never giving up. And if, your goal really was there to educate and graduate,
right.
You're going to go to college. So nothing was going to deter you on there. What's the difference? You making this film now, Kevin, like what has changed with Hollywood with and I know there's more black shows out there, more opportunity, but in your mind, what has changed now with Am I Black Enough For You? Like what are still the same things going on?
You talk about in terms of making it or in terms of telling the story?
In terms of making it, actually.
Okay. Well, technology allows you to do things for much less money. Okay. And I've never been, like, I've worked in the Hollywood system, but I've always been an independent thinker. So even when I was working in the system,
right,
I always would also have one foot in the system and one foot outside of the system. Mm-hmm. So this film cost us less than $20,000 to make.
Right.
Right. This same film, 15, 20 years ago would cost you $500,000 to make.
Oh, wow.
We talked about the film earlier, Death by Temptation, that Sam Jackson was in. That film cost us $350,000 to make. Mm. If we was doing that film today, it would cost about $35,000 to $40,000 to make.
Right.
So the technology allows you to do things cheaper, which in my mind means that you should open up, and instead of complaining about they're not telling our stories, you should use the technology to tell your stories and to also use the same technology to get to exhibit them. Right. Because of the fact that years ago, there was X number of movie theaters and 3 television stations that showed everything on television. Right. Now you have different streaming services. I mean, look, it's like years ago for us to be doing what we're doing right now, we would need to be on some local or national television show. Right. Whereas where this is going worldwide, so the actual appeal of it is wider. And we're sitting both, you're where you are and I'm sitting in my house. Right. So to use the technology, I think gives us fertile ground to tell our story.
Right. Let me ask you another question, because I'm actually getting a call as we talking, and usually and you would be able to edit that out too. But no, that's a good thought. Do you still have to go do jumps through hoops when you put your film? Sort of kind of like a part 2 question when I just asked you. You still got to jump through hoops with these executives and Jewish distributors and stuff like that when you push your films and stuff?
Well, because of my background, not as much. Because I have a background in like I said, I have a background in Hollywood. Right. And outside of Hollywood, I have certain relationships that can allow me to get to certain people. And I have certain experience to let me know that certain people exist. And there's also the one thing I do is I don't run things. Certain people shoot and not knocking them, but certain people shoot and it's a hobby or something that they're doing. For me, whatever I shoot is still, 99.9% of what I shoot is still a business, so that I have knowledge of certain conduits and aggregators that can get my stuff, in a position where it can be monetized. It's not like we're shooting just to get on YouTube and not monetize.
Yeah.
So, I'm fortunate in that regard that my exposure, and look, it's something that other people could do also if they take the time to network to develop those relationships.
And I was just getting ready to say, and actually even Kevin Harewood wrote a book, especially on networking and making it in the business too.
Right, in the music business, yeah.
So, and I'm a witness and a testament. If I can call Kevin at any time, or if I need something, you're like, oh, I'll get back to you in a couple of days. No, let me get right back to you. It's not you. I never heard him say no, I can't do this. And now he's like, oh, I might know somebody. I know something.
Right.
But that's a testament in like your 30 years plus in the business of navigating and doing anything. So, is that really important if you're doing a film and stuff? Is that really important to just navigate relationships and networks and sitting by? Because you have stories.
Yeah, I think it's important almost in any sort of business, because nobody does whatever it is that they do alone. It is you can get souped on yourself and think you're doing something alone, and that is not true. Mm-hmm. You have to have a circle of influence and a circle of support. And fortunately, I in college didn't take business courses. So I learned business by having to do business. Okay. And at early on, I'll be quite frank, I wasn't like, I was doing things, but I couldn't intellectualize what I was doing because I had never studied it.
Right.
But then I realized down the road that the one thing that happened for me was that I was bold enough to go places where a lot of other people weren't bold enough to go, especially, like specifically talking about this. We earlier spoke about the physical racism that existed in my high school with the Italian kids. Right. Well, I went to a predominantly Jewish college, so those kids wasn't physically racist. So while I was there for a couple of years, I thought it wasn't racist. I thought we had got around it. So a key to my career is that I want to be a radio DJ, and the radio station only played rock music, and most of the black kids wouldn't go to the radio station, wouldn't work at the radio station because they didn't want to play Bruce Springsteen and Grateful Dead. And I was like, I'm at this school. It's a very influential school. I found it's a very influential radio station.
Right.
I wanted to be a radio DJ, and this is the place where I have to go to even have a shot at that dream happening. So right. I went and I hung out at the radio station and worked there, became a DJ, and played a lot of Bruce Springsteen and Grateful Dead and Joni Mitchell, all that kind of stuff, and just mixed in Stevie Wonder and some jazz whenever I could.
Right.
And that situation propelled me to working at A&M Records while I was still in college, which everything I've done professionally, for the most part, comes out of that.
Right.
And it also developed networks. I mean, some of my closest friends from college are white Jewish guys that I worked with at that college radio station. Wow. And some of them have gone on to be very powerful. I mean, like one of them, actually, it's funny. One of them used to always do films that they showed at our end of the year party, is an Emmy Award winning producer of 60 Minutes. Like he won his first multi-Emmy. He won his first Emmy for doing the coverage on the war, the Iraq War, under George H.W. Bush. Another guy who won who was the news director. I became the first Black in the history of the school to be in a position of management in programming. the guy who was the news director when I was the music director was a VP at CNN and was the producer when CNN used to have that show, CNN Showbiz Tonight. He was the executive producer of that show.
Wow.
The record label Glass Note, that is where A Mumford & Sons and Secondhand Serenade and Childish Gambino came out on. Danny Glass is a guy that I went to junior high school and college with.
Wow.
You know, so those are you know, and then, you know, people like Chris Rock. It's like Chris Rock lived on a block that I lived on at a particular time when he decided he wanted to he was a teenager. He decided he wanted to, you know, go be serious about comedy.
Right.
And I was already managing Kashif. So he would always see me, you know, coming home with you know, go out of town, coming back home, and knew that I had something to do in the entertainment industry. And he was tight with my friend at the time, who was actually one of his mentors, like a street comedian. That was one of his one of his people he looked up to in terms of, you know, telling comedians on the street. And he asked me where to go, and I told him to go to the comic strip on the Upper East Side. And he was bold enough and serious enough to go there at a time when most Black comedians wouldn't go there.
Right.
Like Eddie Murphy had went there before him, and then that's how he got tight with Eddie Murphy. So, you know, a lot of things are relationships, and you have your circle, and then, you know, one person in that circle may jump off first, and then they pull other people along. Right. Or you may jump off first, and then hopefully you pull other people along with you. Right.
But the key to that really is you never burn your bridges, because you never know who you're going to use or who's looking at you.
Yeah,
you might need a favor for. When you became program manager, was it easy for you to, like you said, to sneak Stevie Wonder and stuff in, or were you just, look, I'm just going to play what they want? And
well, actually, what happened was with my show, from the time I got my show, I was, you know, we did have some freedom to put in, like certain artists were considered, it was what was called a progressive rock freeform format. So, you know, similar to WNEW-FM in New York. I know you're in West Massachusetts, but some people may know WPCN in Boston and stuff like that. So there were certain acts, you know, like a Commodores or certain jazz people, you know, jazz rock fusion, Stevie, Marvin Gaye, Mays, you know, that Al Green, you know, that you could fit in within the regular format.
Right.
So I would, you know, whenever I could, I would do that anyway. But the foundation of the show had to be in rock music. Like you had to follow the format, or you had the freedom within the format, which was progressive rock. So, you know, I like Bruce Springsteen, and it was easy to say to play Bruce Springsteen and come back with Otis Redding right after that, or to play Joni Mitchell or Joan Armatrading and come back with Richie Havens, and then end up with you know, with a Stevie or Frankie Beverly and Mays or something like that. So you just had to be creative in how you got from one place to other places in your mix. You know, and then I would often throw like Dexter Gordon in or John Coltrane in the 3 minutes I had before you get to the news break. You know, and stuff like that.
Right. When you were doing the casting and you would listen to everybody's stories and you had the conversation, were you like amazed by the stories or like surprised by any of the things that you heard?
Okay, so in terms of the other folks' stories, that's in the beginning when it was the real documentary. So obviously I was surprised by AJ telling me that this manager told him what he told him.
Right.
I wasn't surprised by other people who were in the real part because of the fact that, well, first of all, they were chosen because I knew something about them.
Okay,
so I knew that Jackie Reinhardt had worked. I actually used to be Jackie Reinhardt's boss at one point.
Okay.
So I knew her history, a large part of it in the music business, and I knew how she was good at telling things. Maya I liked Maya. I don't even remember I knew that Maya was mixed race, and I knew that Maya was also very articulate and stuff like that. I was surprised when she told the story about the black kids calling her cracker.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you could see where that could affect somebody
Mm.
for their life, actually.
Right.
In Maya's case, she seems relatively well adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
I knew Buddy Lewis's story as a black swimmer. His two main sports were swimming and golfing. So I knew Buddy's history growing up in Gary as a black swimmer and going to Howard.
And you talk about Gary in Indiana swimming. I don't think I know anybody who wanted to go to school. I know a lot of people who swam, but nobody who wanted to play golf when I was coming up, or even anybody who wanted to swim. So that's unique within itself.
Right.
But I could see even people that look like him teasing him and clowning and stuff like that.
Exactly. And when we get to the part that's scripted, I wrote all of that. So all those stories, I know, because and I chose to use those, and I cast people who I felt could pull it off,
right?
To enact those parts of the stories,
right? What did you when you did the film? What was the purpose? What did you want to convey to the audience from doing this film? What was the underlying message?
Okay, so it's two or three. The first thing is that to ourselves and to outsiders, that we as Black people are not monoliths. We all don't think alike. We all don't have the same point of view. We have some consensus, but we can be and we are a variety of things. Okay. Right. The second is that we should define ourselves and not let outsiders define us. Mm-hmm. But in doing that, I always look at Black folks from a worldview, so that I am a person who, my father's side of the family is Caribbean from Barbados, and my mother's side of the family is from the South, from Virginia. Okay. Now, coming up in Brooklyn, at the time when I came up, it wasn't cool to be West Indian. Right. So myself and a lot of my friends who were mixed, would hide our Caribbean portion of it.
Listen, you know what? That story, not to cut you, just hold that point. Mm-hmm. I tell everybody that one of my best friends, who was the point guard on our team, we both shared a position, but he was Jamaican, and I never knew, Kevin, he was Jamaican until my senior year in high school when I went over his house. Never knew it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you hide it though. But go ahead.
Yeah. So you would hide that. So I grew up where I grew up in a situation where, I would hear things from the other side that would be against the other side, depending on which side I was with at that particular point. So One of the things that was funny is West Indians and Bajans, West Indians by some Southern Blacks and American Blacks are looked at like how Black people view Jewish people, that you always got money and you always save money and you're cheap. Right? It's the stereotype, right? So I've heard like people on my mother's side of the family say, well, I know Eustace, which was my dad. I know he got some money stashed away, right? Like that, and things of that nature, and so you had that, and then by being able to travel and being into reggae music, I also, there was a wave of reggae music that came from England after the original wave of Jamaica. So people like Matumbi, Steel Pulse, Linton Kwesi Johnson were from England, and then I went to England and traveling with Freddie Jackson, and kind of like saw places in England that looked like places that I knew from Brooklyn, right? And realized like one of my favorite songs of all time is a song called Sonny's Letter, anti-sus poem by Linton Kwesi Johnson that came out in the late 70s. Well, that song is about the sus law, the suspicion law in England, and how they can bust you just because they think you look suspicious.
Right.
And that's the same as stop and frisk.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people in America wouldn't realize that people in England have this law, or wouldn't even think about that there are commonalities of police brutality that are worldwide, that you have in Canada, you have in the Caribbean with, certain blacks of authority acting certain ways against other blacks of not authority, or I remember being in Jamaica time, the two biggest families that changed power was the Manley family and the Siaga family. And it's like neither one of them was black. I mean, I think Manley was of Lebanese descent or whatever,
and one was Indian, right?
Right. And it's like, well, how you have a country with all these black people,
right,
and nobody's black, right?
Yeah.
Or the leaders are not black, so, and nobody questions them,
right?
So that was the thing, was to bring a Pan-African consciousness, Pan-African view, and to make you think about that. Because in my opinion, if us blacks look at ourselves as one, so you have, imperialism was a conscious thing to rape the countries that had the natural resources of their natural resources.
Right.
All the countries that have the most natural resources, diamond, gold, oil, for the most part, they're countries where people of color are. Africa.
Right.
Okay. The Caribbean. Jamaica is known for weed as a natural resource and bauxite.
Right.
Barbados thrived on sugarcane.
Yeah.
The explorers that they teach us about in elementary school and high school traveled from Europe on them boats looking for spices. So as said in the film, King Leopold put together a convention to discuss with the imperialists how they was going to break over Africa, and this little country, Belgium, owned large parts of Africa. That's why they called it the Belgian Congo.
Right.
Back in the day. So, and they used to feed us that crap. The sun never sets over the British Empire. The British Empire was terrorists.
Right.
Right. But they teach us that, and like it's all good. And you realize this is total BS.
Right. And I seen something good. What was it the other day? Barbados basically cut all their ties with the Queen.
Right. Exactly.
Something.
Well, that's out. In my opinion, that's an outward thing.
Yeah.
That is not overt. I believe that's a technicality, because they still need to have some sort of connection with England, because most of the tourism of Barbados comes from England and from Germany and Canada. So they can't just say, "Hey, look, you're screwed up." So, but it's an official way of how they doctrinate it.
But even with that case, like you said, something real interesting before is you have all of these people and nobody of color running these countries.
Right. Exactly.
So I think
you did that. Fortunately, since 1966 in Barbados, the prime ministers have been black. Now in Jamaica, they weren't for a long time, but in Barbados, the prime minister at least have been black. Even though they had to answer to the Queen, but the Queen, who really doesn't have any power, so that in and of itself, is hilarious, actually.
Right. So those are some good points I think that can come out to the film. So people can understand, and I think this is very important what you're doing, Kevin. Really, to let us see that how powerful you are in the stories we have. We still can persevere for these stories, though. So the film comes out when again?
The film will be out late March.
In late March.
Yeah, it'll be on Amazon and a few other streaming services.
Okay. And big shouts out to AJ Jamal. That's my Festival of Sea brother too on there.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and to AJ, and he was like, "Where I know you from?" I said, "You did my birthday party." Kevin Harewood. He said, "Oh yeah, that's right, man. Yeah, we went out to eat. Yeah, man." Then I see you next year.
Yeah, hopefully we're unfortunately because of what's going on, he's been home, not on the cruises, but
right.
Hopefully sometime soon they can get back out on the cruises and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I heard he does a few of the cruises too, which is
he does all of them. He does Royal Caribbean. He does Carnival. Yeah. He's usually never home, so we have a joke now where like I'll call him up. Let's say if on Wednesday we did an interview together about the film, and I'll call him up and I'll be like, AJ, like what's your schedule look like on like for Thursday? And he'll like, okay, I'm gonna check. And then he's like 24/7 365. It's empty. Right? It's like blank. So we're like, we need to start filling that schedule up. So he's actually gonna start doing a podcast at the end of the month.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Now, how is it doing a film with somebody like AJ? Did he have you rolling in it like it? I mean, I know you had a lot of fun doing it with him, but
Well, I mean, I like laughing. I believe that laughter is, first of all, it's healthy.
Right.
And it's actually scientifically proven that it's healthy because it releases endorphins. But I like laughter. I met the comedians that I know because of the fact that I would, be up in comedy clubs, like when I lived in LA. Like I met AJ the very first day that I moved to Los Angeles in July, the last weekend of July in 1989, to go work at the William Morris Agency, and we've been friends ever since. Wow. And that's if I can laugh at something, I'm gonna laugh. Like even things that are like I actually, I know a lot of people, a lot of Black folks don't watch Fox news, cable news network, right? Well, I watch it because it's so hilarious to me that it's comedy. Right? So I watch. I mean, not every day because you can only take but so much. But I watch Fox and Friends in the morning, or I watch that show up to 5 in the afternoon, and I just crack up because I'm like, these people can't be that stupid.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where that is. And even back in the day with the East Coast, when the West Coast hip hop first started happening, and I was actually splitting my time between New York and California, so I got into people like I got into like when Easy and Compton's, when NWA first came out, and I would take that back to New York, and people in New York was like, "Oh man, you can't listen to this crap."
Right.
And I remember like Easy had some lines on his things that I thought were like totally hilarious, and I would look at it from laughter. Or I remember King T, like I was doing a lot of business with Capitol Records, and King T came out with Sitting on Slauson and bass on Capitol, and Sitting on Slauson, like somebody got shot in the record.
Right.
And I just thought it was hilarious. Like, so I love laughing.
So that's definitely a good thing, though. So I know y'all.
It's actually funny. I'm getting ready to work on a TV show called Inside the Black Box, which is essentially I'm going to help out on this show. It's created by a friend of mine, Tracy Moore, who's a top acting coach and casting director, and it's like an actor inside the actor studio combined with skits show that's going to come on Crackle starting in June. And Joe Morton is also working on that show. He's our co-host. And I actually saw, most people now know Joe Morton because he was Olivia Pope's father on Scandal.
Right.
I've been into Joe Morton since A Brother from Another Planet. And I literally saw A Brother from Another Planet several times in the movie theater.
Right.
So like paid to go to movie theater at least 4 times to see the same movie, you
Right.
know, and I just like quirky stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's good though. So once again, we here with Kevin Harewood. This is my man. This is one of the most humblest people you know. Kevin can sit here and tell you stories and have you like, wow, all day long though. So once again, the movie coming out. You can catch you can go on YouTube right now and get a piece of the trailer right
Yeah, the
now
trailer's on YouTube.
to check it out. When I see Maya in there, and I was just laughing at it, and then Monet's in there too.
Right, Monet plays a character, Chamia Hooks, who's a historian, professor historian, that kind of threads the real part of the movie to the descriptive part.
Let me ask you this last question, and it's back to racism when you look at it, because my first time out in LA, I was blown away because I never thought I could see a more segregated place than Boston until I went to LA. I thought it was one of the most segregated in the city. The difference between LA and like a Boston is, you'll have the Italians here and you'll have Latinos here and this and all, but LA has their own Korean town, they have like different races with their own plots and stuff like that. Going from New York to LA, what was the biggest shock for you?
Okay, so the first thing you realize is that most major cities have a lot, and have had for several decades now, a lot of people of color, or most major cities that I have been to. So your Phillies, your Chicagos, your Detroits, your Hartfords, Springfield, San Francisco, Oakland, New York, have at least 35% Black folks or more, right? And LA City is only about 12% Black people.
Mm-hmm. Your mic went down.
And LA County is less than 8%. So that, from sheer numbers, there's just the absence of Blackness. And you have to go out of your way, like you have to go out of your way to find Black people. So that I remember when I did the first film, the New York Daily News interviewed me, and we talked, some of the same conversations were coming up then, and we talked about the lack of Black people in Hollywood. And I asked the writer, I said, "Have you ever been to Los Angeles?" And he said no at the time. And I said, people write and push through things that they know. So if you're sitting in your car and you're an exec, and you never see Black people, you literally can exist and not see any Black people.
Wow.
Or not that many. So I'm not saying that it's right, but at least maybe understand it. Because of the fact there aren't that many Black people. It's a low percentage of Black people. That was the biggest thing for me.
Right, and I kind of noticed that too. The other issue I noticed too is the transportation.
You gotta be in the car. It's getting a little bit better. They do have a subway system now.
Yeah.
But the days when your car breaks down, you got to get on a bus.
Yeah. So listen, we really appreciate you. Our time is up, and I really appreciate you coming on here.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Definitely, it's always a pleasure. And like I said, Kevin is a good brother, man. He's very humble. We can sit here for hours, and we can talk about stories and people he's met, and you would just be mystified and humble. Matter of fact, me and I had Reginald Bullock on our show.
I need to reach out to Reg.
Yeah, one of the first, and he's actually a filmmaker. Reginald Bullock actually was my Black history teacher in prep school.
Oh, wow.
So we were talking about how humble Kevin was and what a good person Kevin is too. So these are filmmakers. These are people I have a pleasure of knowing, and I'm thankful for the relationships, and just as always, continued success. And when the film drops and it comes out, so I would like to also collaborate with you, maybe through Palmuzo Museum or through the school systems up here, so we can get the film. We definitely can do some showings and do some things with the film.
Thanks.
With the audience too. So we're gonna hook that up. Actually, we had Kevin up here. We did one showing with him with film. He also did a program with me as well up here about music in the industry and stuff like that. So he's no stranger to Springfield.
Yeah, I love
Springfield. Yeah, he comes up here from time to time.
Actually, I don't know if I said this to you, Drew. When I was married, my daughter's mother is a Springfield native.
Okay, I think you did.
Unfortunately, she went away to college. She never came back.
Okay.
Springfield native. Yeah.
Okay. Something keeps tracking you back to Springfield. So, and then I want to thank you as well too, because I still got people buzzing about the Such concert that we did about a year ago.
Yeah, we got to get that going again.
We got to get that. So as soon as we open up again, I'm gonna be hitting you up though. So once again, leave your information. You got a YouTube page, Kevin. You got the Twitter. You got all your information.
My IG is at Harewood Kevin, HarewoodKevin. My Twitter is at Harewood Kev, HarewoodKev. You can also hit me up via email. It's Indie Streets Films at earthlink.net. INDIEZSTREETSFILMS at earthlink.com. And you can always just put my name in the search engine. It'll find me. And eclecticentertainment.com is my website. So I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody out there. And let's stay Black.
Got a comment, Jillian Henson. Thank you. Okay,
Tell her,
good.
thank her. I need some of those products.
definitely hit her up though. But once again, I appreciate Kevin. We're gonna do it again. As always, we always connect. We're gonna do it again. And before I leave that, Brooklyn or the Knicks, what we doing?
No, come on. I'm a Knicks fan. I'm not jumping on any bandwagons. So
listen, Kevin is one of
enjoying the Knicks. I have low. I hope that this year they have the play-in. So 7 through 10 got to play in a play-in to get in the playoffs. So I'm just hoping that the Knicks get 10 or above. It looks like so far this year they haven't been lower than 10.
Right.
But it's tight. There's a few teams that's in that battle.
Yeah.
And I'm enjoying the fact that kids like Barrett and this kid Quickly is real good. Barrett, Mitch.
Quickly is real.
Mitch, Randall, they've all gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully the light bulb soon goes off in Knox and we're all good.
Yeah, right? I remember this, and I gotta say this before I leave. I remember posting when this kid was at Kentucky his second year that the Knicks should draft him, and basically got laughed out of the group we in on and look at him now. I wish I could find that because I always try to find these quotes and stuff. I wish I could find him, but that
was talking about Quickly.
Yeah, I posted it and people laughed me out. And one in particular, I can't think of his name. One, I'm talking. Ty laughed me out of the.
Okay. I'm gonna tell him that.
Yeah. So, and he's been a good find though. But once again, I appreciate that and appreciate you having. We got Sam, who actually the director of Palmuzo, good stuff.
Okay.
So I know he's probably gonna be reaching out with me after about definitely getting you up and let's do in a series.
All right. Well, I love it. All I gotta do is get in my car and come up 95 to 91.
All right. Okay. All right. So once again, this is the Truth and Veil 2.0. I'll see you next week. We got a special show as well for you next week. And so we out. So just hang out, Kevin. We'll just close it out.
Okay. Take care. Thanks again.